print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello and good evening. This is Don Swans, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 22nd issue of the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Front page. Interesting drawing there. There's a picture of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, looking in one direction, and a picture of Pope Leo XIV looking in the opposite direction. The title of the article is "The Quiet American," and underneath that a subtitle of "Pope Leo XIV pushes back against President Trump." And the question is, can the pontiff from Chicago make a difference in an era of raw power politics? It's brought to us by the work of Marcus Walker and Elizabeth Bernstein. War is back in vogue. So said Pope Leo XIV to ambassadors from around the world in a marbled hall above the main entrance to St. Peter's Basilica in January. He did not name names, or have to. President Trump was flexing America's military might in Venezuela and the Caribbean, threatening to take over the Danish territory of Greenland, and assembling an armada for a looming war with Iran. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was grinding on. The way Pope Leo saw it, powers were seeking to impose dominion through arms and undermining the taboo since World War II on changing borders by force. This gravely threatens the rule of law, he said, which is the foundation of all peaceful civil coexistence. His words were the latest salvo in a growing effort to insert himself into a world of spiraling conflicts. The 70-year-old Pope, born as Robert Prevost in Chicago and known for most of his life as Bob, has had a quiet start to his pontificate. But with the world facing crisis after crisis, the first ever American Pope is stepping up his efforts at moral suasion in defense of a fading international order that the American president, among other leaders, is rapidly dismantling. The papacy has always been political, but now some of the biggest challenges to its mission of society are coming from the U.S. Just as the 1.4 billion strong Catholic Church is led by an American for the first time in its 2,000-year history. The Midwestern Pontiff brings a deeper understanding of American society and politics than any previous pope. That means his critiques can't be dismissed by U.S. politicians as easily as a foreign pope's would be, say, senior church officials. Complicating his task is the fact that millions of American Catholics voted for Trump. However, the conservative advocacy group Catholic Vote, which helped mobilize support for Trump, is now warning that widespread mistrust among Catholics over his hardline immigration tactics could cost the Republicans some of those gains. Leo does not want to be the anti-Trump, senior Vatican officials say. Rather, the Pope is advocating positively for a world that reflects Catholic teaching. But the contrast of style and substance between the world's two most prominent Americans, one a brash billionaire's businessman who speaks in superlatives, the other a former missionary who spent years helping the needy in Peru, is too glaring to miss. They are offering very different images of America, but they're both authentic representations of who we are, said Elsie Ann Allen, author of Pope Leo XIV, a new biography, and writer for the Catholic news website Crooks. The cardinals who gathered in the Sistine Chapel last May elected Leo in the hope that he would restore tranquility to the global Catholic Church after turbulent years under the charismatic but at times polarizing Pope Francis, who unleashed bitter debates between progressive and conservative Catholics about doctrine, morality, and the direction of the Church. In Leo, they saw both clarity and consensus builder. I think the cardinals were looking for three things, said Alistair Dutton, Secretary General of Caritas International, the Global Confederation of Catholic Humanitarian Organizations. They wanted continuity with Pope Francis. They wanted the unifying conciliatory spirit of Pope Leo. But they also wanted a strong pope who could stand toe-to-toe with the big men of history of today, which includes the new American administration, but not only. Leo and Trump have yet to meet or speak with each other directly. A meeting might not happen for a while. Leo declined, at least for this year, an invitation to visit the United States that Vice President J.D. Vance gave him in Rome last May. Leo has already managed to tone down the tensions within the global church by continuing to champion the poor and the marginalized, while also affirming traditional Catholic teaching on divisive issues, such as same-sex marriage and female priests. The combination has helped Leo to bring the bulk of the Catholic hierarchy and faithful on board. The global stage presents a different challenge. His low-key approach, say some papal observers, has made it harder for him to make himself heard in a wider world that's being shaken up by populism, strongman leaders, and raw power politics. When white smoke arose over the Sistine Chapel last May, and Leo's election was announced to the crowd in St. Peter's Square, many people's reaction was puzzlement as they quickly Googled him on their smartphones. Prevost was little known to the wider public except in Peru, where he was greatly admired during his more than 20 years as a missionary and bishop. Even in his native Chicago, he was a hometown hero most of the city had only recently heard of. The U.S. once had a complicated relationship with the papacy. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he had to reassure voters that his allegiance lay with America, and he would accept no instructions from Rome. Such doubts have largely been overcome over the past 60 years as Catholics have contributed prominently to American society and culture, said Archbishop Paul Coakley of Oklahoma City, president of the Conference of U.S. Bishops. The fact that we now have an American Pope is the icing on the cake. For many people, it demonstrates that you can be a good Catholic and a good American. For the global church, too, Leo's election confirmed the American Catholic community at the heart of the Catholic family, said Archbishop Paul Gallagher, the Vatican Secretary for Relations with States. Rarely, if ever, have as many Catholics filled leading positions in American public life. From Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who are seen as Trump's two most likely Republican successors, to some of the GOP House leadership and most of the Supreme Court. Still, the election of an American Pope was a surprise, since many prelates, including Prevost himself, believed that the College of Cardinals would not hand the papacy to the U.S., on top of all the superpowers' other clout. Curiosity about Leo's background and biography quickly turned him into one of the world's most famous people. Soon, everyone in Chicago knew he was a White Sox fan. Americans learned that his melting pot family history, including French, Italian, Spanish, and mixed-race Louisiana Creole roots. Users of Duolingo noticed that Leo, already a polyglot, was using the app in the small hours to study German. Leo's humility quickly helped make him internationally popular. A survey across 61 countries published by Gallup International in January found that Leo has easily the highest approval rating of any global leader. Kevin Hayes, a retired architect and member of Resurrection Parish in a suburban Pittsburgh church, said he was delighted to see an American pontiff. I now have somebody who's making statements from the Vatican who understands American culture and politics. It's not only the Pope talking to you, but it's an American talking to you with moral authority. Leo didn't want to get involved in politics, he told his biographer, Alan. That's not what the church is about. But I'm not afraid to raise issues that I think are gospel issues, that hopefully people on both sides of the aisle, as we say, will be able to listen to. Tensions over immigration made it hard to stay out. Trump's team has been sparring with the Vatican over its immigration policies ever since it took office in early 2025. Vance and Rubio politely debated the matter with Leo on a visit to Rome soon after his election last May. The rift deepened as the administration's immigration crackdown escalated over the summer. Raids by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement led to the detention of tens of thousands of immigrants and clashes between protesters and law enforcement amid an atmosphere of civil strife in several U.S. cities. ICE's tactics caused widespread anger among Catholic Latinos as they saw friends, neighbors, and relatives rounded up. For years, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops had been known for various disagreements between its conservative majority and progressives aligned with Pope Francis. On immigration, however, the administration's actions led to a rare unity. An overwhelming majority of bishops voted for a declaration in November that denounced a climate of fear and condemned the indiscriminate mass deportation of people. Someone who says I'm against abortion, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the U.S. I don't know if that's pro-life, told reporters at the scenic papal retreat of Castel Gandolfo outside Rome. Politicians who claim to support Catholic teaching need to realize it comes as a package. He was echoing an argument by a former Archbishop of Chicago, Joseph Bernardine, who said respect for life was a seamless garment that covers all the ways in which human life can be protected or violated. The White House quickly responded to Leo, rejecting the allegation that illegal immigrants were being treated inhumanely. The Catholic Church is wrong, White House border czar Tom Homan, who is a Catholic, told reporters. I think they need some time fixing the Catholic Church. But the Church's pushback against ICE resonated deep into mainstream America, said Father Robert Sirico, a Catholic priest and co-founder of the Action Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Speaking as an American conservative, a lot of Americans, including those who are concerned about immigration, think ICE have gone too far, he said. The Catholic Church in particular has a strong immigrant base. I think Pope Leo had to take a stand on that. Not everyone is happy about it. Josh Mercer, a Catholic from Petrosky, Michigan, who's also an executive at Catholic Vote, said he wants more clarity from the Pope, that church teaching allows a country to uphold its immigration rules. It gets to the question, if a country has the right to control its borders, then what level of immigration enforcement is acceptable? The bishops are continuing the fight. In February, they filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court asking it to halt what they called Trump's immoral order to end birthright citizenship. Contesting the use of military force by the U.S. and others, powers such as Russia is proving even more difficult for the Vatican, one of the world's tiniest states. The growing resort to warfare is squeezing the space for papal envoys' efforts at quiet meditation. In the Middle East, the Vatican said Pope Leo had turned down Trump's invitation to join his Board of Peace last month, even as an observer. The United Nations should be the forum for managing international crises, the Vatican said. The White House called the decision deeply unfortunate. On Venezuela, Pope Leo and his top aide, Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, tried at Christmas to persuade the Trump administration to pursue a peaceful solution, such as arranging Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's departure and exile. Russia had offered Maduro asylum, according to three officials familiar with the U.S.-Vatican conversation, which was first reported by the Washington Post. Only days later, Trump seized Maduro by force. And now there is Cuba. The Vatican is trying to encourage a diplomatic solution between the U.S. and the island, where it's worried about worsening humanitarian consequences from the U.S. oil blockade. Washington and Havana have opened talks, but Trump stepped up his threats to overthrow Cuba's leaders on Monday, saying he expected to have the honor of taking Cuba in some form. With the Iran war escalating, Pope Leo has called for an immediate ceasefire to end what he calls the atrocious violence. U.S. cardinals have criticized the White House over its justification for the war, as well as its social media posts that mix war footage with action movies and video games. As wars multiply, Pope Leo's aides are not despairing about the possibility of diplomacy. Some believe its day might return. The preferred option at the moment seems to be the gun, not the pen, said Gallagher, the Pope's foreign minister. We're a bit skeptical that people are going to achieve their goals pursuing their military policies. Things don't seem to ever work out the way that the leaders have imagined. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Changing directions now. Here's an article entitled simply, How did Epstein snare so many otherwise savvy people? A good question that Holly Peterson has asked us. Here's her remarks about the topic. In the dribbling and desultory release of Jeffrey Epstein's emails over the past few months, one question has arisen above the filthy froth. Why did brilliant economists, doctors, chieftains of industry seek Epstein's counsel and kowtow to him? Shouldn't they have known better? Part of the answer is simply his famous black book of contacts. Among a certain set, particularly the one I grew up around with in Manhattan, we salivated over whose name might be tarnished next. But as it played out, the little book served as a road map of who mattered. When a new list came out, I had a dinner partner who first said he'd hoped he wasn't in the black book. Remembers Yuan Rayleigh, the co-founder of investment firm BDA Partners. Then he checked his phone right there under the table and said, "Oh, thank God, I am." Sure, Epstein was a serial child sex offender who orchestrated a vast multi-state network to groom and exploit minors. But most of his hangers-on were not in it for sex. And though some of the names listed have since been implicated in his crimes, or at least knew about his conviction, many others were dumbfounded to be mentioned at all because they never met Epstein. To understand those convening at Epstein's dinner table, know this law of power. Rich people don't get richer from tax windfalls. As any social scientist will tell you, studies show that most rich people get richer because they hang out together. And going to one dinner at Epstein's was just so damn efficient. By bantering with the right people, even if invited by an unsavory host, the hedge fund bro or TV director might just grab the brass ring on the merry-go-round, a connection to an Ivy League trustee for your high schooler, a green light for a TV series, something that would be difficult to achieve on their own. Most of the men I know would cut off a limb to play 18 holes at Augusta National. There was something about the world behind the closed doors of Epstein's townhouse, or in the privacy of the island, where they all believed they were receiving information that could give them an edge. And that is what it was all about. It was like a private club, says investigative reporter Vicky Ward, who had interactions with Epstein in person. He dangled people in front of people he knew they'd want to connect with. This is a case of sheer transactionality. From my own vantage inside this world, I've seen the good and the bad. When heavyweights exchange ideas, much good could come in the form of entrepreneurship and innovation. The American system of philanthropy is partly responsible for museums, hospitals, schools, and relief for the country's underprivileged. Even after donating $100 million from the sale of a Roy Lichtenstein masterpiece, the philanthropist Eggy Gund never felt she'd done enough. Shortly before her death last year, she told me, "As you age, you get concerned that you did it right. There are so many other problems I would like to be able to attack." On the dark side, I've seen gluttonous greed and utterly neurotic need to fit in and be seen. The act of striving for more, like some frenzied truffle hound, is usually an attempt to override fear. Insecurity among the self-made is often nuclear-powered from deep within a fragile psyche. Most of these strivers were not entitled scions playing with daddy's money. Like Epstein, whose father was a New York City parks groundskeeper, they had stratospheric trajectories from, say, a working-class background to running a multinational corporation. With Epstein, their social ambitions were so urgent, they failed to be discerning. In their sweaty striving to be hosted and toasted at the right dinners, book parties, panels, benefits, or openings, the paleo protein of New York upper crust, evening smorgasbord, many lost their bearings. Call it a fancy form of FOMO. I've been privy to someone's absurd envy over a rival's bigger jet and heard people running huge enterprises speak of wanting to start another one at 70. There's safety in that insatiability, which is why most self-made people in Manhattan never retire, regardless of where they fall on the income spectrum. Many people can relate to wanting to be included or badly needing help from someone and bending their standards or ethics to get it. Peter Attia, the longevity guru and best-selling author who recently resigned from CBS when his sophomoric banter with Epstein came to light, copped to his blind attraction to power. In an apology posted on X, Attia said that when he went to Epstein's home between 2014 and 2019, at that point in my career, I had little exposure to prominent people, and that level of access was novel to me. At these visits, he encountered leading scientists, business leaders, and heads of state. In retrospect, the presence and credibility of such venerable people in different orbits led me to make assumptions about him that clouded my judgment in ways that it shouldn't have. Attia has a point. It was well known that Epstein's guest list could include figures like Palantir's Peter Thiel, Treasury Secretary Larry Summer, or former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who helped whitewash Epstein's image by being the draw at one of his dinners. Their presence conferred credibility. The way I see it, many Epstein hangers-on believed they were doing nothing wrong. Success made them feel untouchable. You know the thinking of so-and-so power brokers also in the room. Why should I worry? None of these folks ever thought they'd be called to account. They looked at each other and thought, we're too big to fail. As for Epstein's former associates and friends, both men and women that I've spoken to who knew him say his powers of seduction could be intoxicating. They also told me he could turn on a dime and become reclusive or even disdainful of dinner guests. You may ask, couldn't these titans gather with anyone, anytime they wanted? And here's another law of social power. New Yorkers don't entertain at home often. There's no easy backyard after work to gather around. In such a socially competitive and professionally rapacious city, having a dinner party is intimidating. Too much work. And very few people, even with boatloads of cash, end up hosting one. It's not a takeout affair when you're inviting CEOs, acclaimed economists, or best-selling authors over. Fast forward to today, where an appearance in the Justice Department's file dump can potentially ruin your life. In some respects, this is insanity. The names of many New Yorkers who never met Epstein appear in the DOJ files, and many listed in his black book never knew him either. Huh? Sure, some he knew, but that book was Ghislaine Maxwell's curation, a mishmash of people, many of whom she believed he should meet. My name appears in the book, but I was never introduced to Epstein. I did once spy him across the room at a cocktail party for Prince Andrew in the early 2000s. All the men were wearing suits. Epstein in his schlumpy gray sweatshirt and sweatpants radiated energy as he alone stood at the staircase, surveying the room. Apparently, the tracksuit was what Vicky Ward calls his shtick. He liked to wear them when everyone was dressed up. It was not a so subtle F you. A friend who was at the party with me recalls that As underdressed as he was, Epstein pulled everyone's focus to him, even the most powerful people in the room. Those who spent time with Epstein were drawn for different reasons. For the men seeking sex, I have a feeling they couldn't get girls when they were younger by the traditional methods of, say, flowers, charm, and in my case, a lot of pleading, says Graydon Carter, a former editor of Vanity Fair. You know, all of a sudden, some 19-year-old with a Russian accent is showing interest in them, and they think they're Brad Pitt. Or perhaps people engaged with Epstein out of pure curiosity to figure out where his power and money came from. They felt trying to answer that didn't implicate them in his crimes. Those are questions we still haven't figured out nearly 7 years after his death. What was Epstein seeking in the end? Apart from gratifying criminal sexual deviancy, my theory is that he wanted to be seen as someone his contemporaries considered worthy of his own black book. But in the end, that proved to be a hollow dream. After all, professionally speaking, compared to all the people he lured into his lair, Epstein never accomplished anything. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Now here's a different change from our normal recipe of articles. It's written by Adam Chandler and entitled What the Rise of Chicken Thighs Says About America. Eric Huang, of the Pecking House's founder, is quoted as a chef, I love seeing thighs get their moment. The fried chicken sandwich at Pecking House in New York is not your average sandwich, featuring a chicken thigh brined in buttermilk, MSG, and 5-spice powder before being fried twice and dunked in chili oil laced with duck fat. The dish has been anointed as one of the city's best by the likes of Bon Appetit and Eater. It's also a testament to bygone stigmas and ascendant trends in American dining. It wasn't all that long ago that dark meat was unpopular across certain swaths of American culinary culture, owing to popular misconceptions about its healthiness, cleanliness, and quality. Now, people are eating more chicken thighs for protein, flavor, and for economical reasons. And that's the comment from Eric Huang, the Pecking House's founder and former 11 Madison Park sous chef. It's juicy, it's delicious. It has a really great texture. is just logistically a little more forgiving. Back in 2007, even as the average American ate chicken about 9 times a month, only 2 of those instances involved dark meat at all, according to an annual industry study conducted by the National Chicken Council. For decades, chicken thighs rated so low in the national pecking order that U.S. poultry producers unloaded much of their darker meat yield to hungry markets abroad in Russia, Mexico, and across Asia. All the while, chefs, culinary historians, and industry observers were pleading for Americans to embrace poultry's dark side. Enough is enough, the late Josh Ozerski wrote in one critique in 2011. The time has come to get with the dark meat program. The boneless thigh may be the most perfect piece of meat or poultry imaginable. In recent years, American diners have finally taken full stock of the dark meat cut, thanks to a 4-piece combo involving immigration from regions that embrace dark meat, along with evolving culinary culture, economic forces, and technological advances. Chicken thighs are ubiquitous in salads, bowls, and burritos, from high-priced fast casual outfits like Sweet Green, Cava, and Chipotle, in the plastic foam boxes of New York's halal carts, and the cast-iron dishware of its trendiest restaurants. In a surreal moment in recent dark meat history, the popular chicken wing, Wingtop, introduced a virtual concept dubbed, Thigh Stop. Even ground chicken, which is primarily made of dark meat, has seen a sales surge, with Circana reporting a 23% yearly increase in November. Chicken thighs are roosting in recipes from high-end wellness resorts for top spenders, and in the grocery carts of average consumers who are increasingly steering toward poultry because of record-high beef prices in recent months. In an earnings call last month, the chief executive of Pilgrim's Pride, the second largest poultry producer in the U.S., said boneless and dark meat volumes are growing at double-digit rates across the entire food industry. Among restaurateurs and poultry producers, this development represents an enormous cultural shift. For years, the stigma largely centered around health perceptions. Robert O'Brien, the head chef of Popeyes, wrote in an email, "White meat was marked as leaner and therefore better for you." And that messaging stuck. The wisdom around white meat's superiority emerged not just from henhouse superstition and a perception of cleanliness owing to darker meat's color, but also from a medical establishment that associated dark meat with higher fat and calories more than flavor. In 1994, guidelines set by the Food and Drug Administration limited which foods could be labeled healthy based partially on their fat content. In grocery aisles and the public consciousness, items such as avocados and almonds were deemed too fatty to be healthy, while Cocoa Puffs and Pop-Tarts technically qualified. Ironically, heavily processed and oddly shaped chicken patties, tenders, and nuggets were popular so long as they claimed to contain 100% white meat. McDonald's, for example, rolled out their white meat McNuggets with considerable fanfare in late 2003 and saw a significant sales bump. As the American consensus on nutrition evolved, production techniques advanced in ways that primed chicken thighs for the American masses. Machines built to debone chicken breast were eventually modified to debone dark meat pieces, which gave less of a visual shock to finicky consumers who tend to prefer that meat not resemble an actual animal, even on food labels, according to a study by the UK Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Or, as the writer John Updike once confessed, "I don't like meat to look like animals. I prefer it in the form of sausages, hamburgers, and meatloaf, far removed from the living thing." It certainly also helps that chicken thighs, by wide acclaim, are more difficult to cluck up in the kitchen. Both chefs Huang and O'Brien describe the cut as more forgiving than white meat, which has made it popular among professional chefs and featherweight home cooks alike. You really can cook well past like 190 degrees, maybe 200 degrees, and it's still really great, Huang argued. Personally, as a chef, I love seeing thighs get their moment. They've always been a workhorse in professional kitchens because of their depth of flavor and versatility. Of course, chicken thighs and dark meat in general have been a celebrated ingredient of American cooking and foodways for centuries, including in Southern and Black traditions. But according to both trend reports and poultry industry executives, the recent rise of chicken thighs can also be attributed to the increase in Asian and Hispanic populations, who have been the fastest-growing demographic groups in the U.S. for decades, and for whom chicken thighs are a more central culinary fixture. As a result, even bone-in dark meat prices have gained a whopping 93% increase from the average just 5 years prior, as one industry publication noted in January. Places where dark meat had been overlooked are finally seeing the light. O'Brien, a 17-year veteran of Popeyes, explained the company has seen strong demand in regions where dark meat historically wasn't as dominant, especially noting the Midwest and Northeast as areas where white meat used to be the default preference. For the chicken thigh devotees, it's poultry in motion. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the Wall Street Journal Review. We read from the Wall Street Journal Review every Thursday at 7 p.m. Your reader this evening has been Don Swans. And I thank you for listening. I truly do. And hope and ask you to be at this same place next to your radio with the dial tuned as where it should be always, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Good night now.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the New York Times. Following at 9 o'clock is Money Magazine. And at 10 o'clock, we got episode number 14 of The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. Stay with us for these readings and more. If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio Reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which